viewers, and welcome to Dave's Garage. Out in the garage today, I was doing a little bit of work and also want to get caught up on some videos, and I'm redoing the introduction to this video because as I did the video, things didn't exactly go as planned. So before we get started in the actual repair, let's get a sneak preview of what we're going to be looking at since we have an old brake rotor here that came off the truck. If you look at the back of this brake rotor, that contact patch there, that is not what you want to see. That has been reduced down. It's only about three-quarters of an inch across there is the contact portion. And when you look at the front, and this has been sitting a while, that surface rust there, the bright orange, that's come on there since I've done this job. This was smooth and shiny on this side. But it was around, I think 1 3/4, maybe a little bit closer to 2 inches of surface contact area across here where the pads run. Now when you're doing a visual inspection on your vehicle, it's real easy to see this side, and you can see if you just glance at that, you're going to say, well, the contact area looks nice, bright and shiny like it should, so I must not have any problems. But what you didn't realize was on this side, you've got this problem that's occurring. So let's discuss what causes that. From the best I can tell, what causes that is the salt that gets put on the road in the wintertime. Where I live, we have a lot of snowy winters, and the salt trucks will come out, throw salt all over the place, and of course that later gets wet, and it gets thrown up under your vehicle, and that stuff settles into all the systems that are exposed to the bottom of the vehicle, one of those being the brake system. On these Chevrolets, and there's several other makes that have the same type of configuration, they have the brake hardware that's mounted into the caliper mounting brackets, and the salt in whatever degree gets between the hardware and the caliper mounting bracket causes that mounting bracket to rust, and the rust swells, and it basically pinches that hardware, which in turn pinches the brake pad mounts that ride in that hardware track. When that happens, it causes the brake pads to seize up inside of the caliper mounting bracket, and you end up with the brake pad that will start to kind of twist inside as the caliper piston pushes on it. It'll try to twist, but eventually it just gets completely froze up inside and can't move at all. And you end up with a pattern like that. Something I want to start doing in these videos is if you see a tool or something that I'm using, especially if it's a special tool that is necessary for the job I'm doing, then look in the video description down below, and you'll find a link to where you can get that tool. As I said, things didn't go as planned when I did this repair. Generally what I like to do with a brake job is I want to take a lot of the fluid out of the master cylinder, and then when I get down to the calipers and I start compressing the caliper back, I want to open the bleeder screws so that all that fluid comes out instead of going back up to the system, and I want to come back behind and put fresh fluid in. Now, that might worry a lot of people because you don't want to get air into the system. So what I would normally do is use a vacuum pump and hook it to the bleeder nipple, and then set a vacuum on it, about 5, I think it's inches of mercury is what it is, but just a light vacuum. And once I'm sure I got a good vacuum with that bleeder nipple closed, then I open up the bleeder, and immediately fluid will start coming out. And then if any fluid does get drawn back in, it's drawn that old fluid back up, it's not drawing air. So that'll prevent air from getting into the system. And you still do a little bit of bleeding to make sure you get it done. What you're going to find in this video and what happens is the bleeders are completely rotted. So they're not leaking where they're sealed against the caliper. That's in good shape. But my ability to get them off ain't going to happen. At least not the day I did this. And I was short on time, so it wasn't something I could address right then. I have to address it at a later time. But in that situation, they're not leaking. So since I'm kind of in a hurry, it's leave them alone, and we'll fix them at a later date. Because what we can do, and what the service manual actually suggests, is to not open the system at all. And when you compress the caliper piston, you're just shoving that fluid back up through the system and into the master cylinder. So what you're going to want to do here at the start is you're going to take a little bit of fluid out, and I would say just suck a little bit of fluid out down to where it's at the minimum line. I use the same vacuum pump that I do for the brake bleed to suck that fluid out. And again, if you want one of those little vacuum pumps, link in the description to get one. Alright, so enough jibber jabbering while I sit in the chair, because that's not what you wanted to see. You want to see me working on a truck. So let's get to it, and when I'm done, I'll come back and we'll discuss a little bit more. I've already got the truck up on jack stands. Make sure you're using jack stands. Let's be safe. So now let's get the wheels off. I'm also going to go get the other side, and I'll explain why here in a minute. First, let me point out something here. This is our bleed nipple. We're not going to be using that because that thing has rotted to nothing. There's actually nothing for me to get my wrench on. It's completely rusted to where the points of contact for the wrench are gone. So we are going to be pushing the brake fluid back up into the caliper, or the master cylinder. So that's plan B. I'm not a fan of it, but even the service manuals, that's the recommendation from the service manual. It's better to not do that, but we kind of have no option here. This will be another project, replacing that nipple, but it may be a day. That's one of those things, you might be able to get that nipple off there without problem, or it may break. If it breaks, you're buying a new caliper. So we'll worry about that one down the road. It's not been open, so nothing's getting in or out of it, and that works for now. One of the things you're going to do is make the truck work with you. Grab this and just turn the wheels. Just like that. Now you got access to your brake caliper and so forth. Clearly, there's a lot of rust back here, and we need to get this thing ready for me to take all this apart. So right now, we're going to apply some penetrating oil. That bolt's getting ready to come off, and this goes to your caliper bracket, your mounting pins. There's a bottom one. All right, now you just go do the other side with those soaked for a minute. All right, proper names before I forget, so you'll know what you're talking about. Caliper mounting bolts, caliper mounting bracket bolts. On the top, you've got caliper mounting bolt, and back here you've got the caliper mounting bracket bolt for the top. These are 19 millimeter, and apparently these are 18 millimeter. We're going to start making dust, and this should probably go without saying. Before I get started, I want to point out something to you. This is the back of the brake pad. And if you hook a C-clamp from here to back here, then you can compress that. You'll compress the pistons, and you might need to do that. If this won't lift off here easy, you might need to compress those. There may be a ridge right here that's preventing that from lifting up, but we'll get to that if we need to. I'm going to do the bottom one first. My goal is to get it loose and then just lift this up. Just going to pivot on that. Came off nice and easy. And it's stuck. Well, this is what I was talking about doing with the C-clamp, except I don't have a big enough C-clamp to do it correctly, so I'm using this thing to get by. Make sure you do both pistons. What we're going to find is that the brake pads don't even come up with the caliper. It's actually that the brake pads are rusted and seized to the caliper. But doing the C-clamp method will help bust that loose. A little bit of prying helps. Granted, I need to invest in a pry bar, but if you have a beefy screwdriver that you don't care about, makes a good substitute. Right, what I'm seeing is there's rust between the pad and the caliper, and it's holding it on. So we're going to use a little penetrating oil, hopefully slick things up. So we got a little movement. He's wanting to come undone. Actually, it's just going to slide right off for me. All right. So what I want to do is use this bungee strap, and I'm going to hang it through my shock, or through the spring rather. We're going to hang the caliper with that. I still want to get this pin out of here so that I can service it. Alright, so here's one pin, so you might be asking yourself, where's the other one? Now it's right here. And apparently it's seized up. Alright, so here's what we got. This pin is completely seized up inside of there. And it's going to take a lot to get it undone. And when I come into a situation like this, what I like to do is do the least amount of damage possible. But I'll start lightly, and then in this case I'll come to the realization I'm just going to have to do what I have to do to get that thing out of there. And if I break something along the way, then I'll just have to replace that part. It's not what I want to do, but sometimes you just have to do what you have to do to get the job done. So let's start with a little tapping. Clearly tapping's not going to work, so even though there's nothing threaded in there, hopefully this impact is going to help break up whatever is causing it to be seized, the rust with the dried up grease or whatever's going on in there. That'll kind of break that up. As you can probably imagine, that little dust boot right there is just shredded at this point. I guess we'll be replacing that. That's not good. This is going to be a part of the problem we were having because of it. Let's go call the auto parts store and see if we can get some new guide pins, and probably just need to go on and replace that bracket. Alright, so the auto parts store had what I need. Well, it had new slide pins. I wanted to get the whole new bracket because I feel like this is going to be cruddy. They don't have that. You have to buy a whole new caliper, which is probably going to happen later when I go after that bleed nipple. I'm anticipating that bleed nipple is going to break off. So next step we want to do is remove the bolts that hold on the caliper mounting bracket, which is these two right here. Don't get them confused with your knuckle bolts there. But we will go with these, and these are 18s. Those had some Loctite on them, so we're going to put Loctite on them when we put them back in here after a while. I'll just work this thing off here. All right. As you can see on the back of this rotor, you've only got this much, a little more than half of the contact of where it's supposed to be. The pad should be rubbing right here. By comparison, if you look at the front of the rotor, you got a lot more contact area there. If you look at the pads, this is where it's deceiving. You look down at those pads, they look good, but you still got all this problem going on. You still got all that problem going on back there. All right, these pads, they should be able to move somewhat smooth in these brackets, and this is pretty much completely seized up. And in that corner, you look in that corner and the pad is actually breaking away. It's completely froze up in here, and this is why we're having a lot of problems. I'll try to get these out. There's one out. I don't know if you can really even see what I'm doing. Just taking this hammer and trying my best to knock these out. Now I got the first one out, I should be able to hit this one back. There we go. I'm going to clean it up. I'm going to start with the wire wheel. Be careful not to actually take metal off, but you want to get that rust off. If you're using a die grinder or anything spinning with that little wire wheel, wear thick rubber gloves. I'm telling you this from experience. This thing gets loose, and just for that split thousandth of a second goes across your finger, it will bleed and it will scar. Wear the big gloves. Alright, there's your cleaned up bracket. Next step I want to do is push the pistons back into the calipers. Alright, now originally I wanted to open up the bleeder to let the fluid come out. That way I'd be pushing that old fluid out of it, and I wouldn't be pushing things back into the master cylinder. It's kind of controversial. Some say it's perfectly okay. Even the service manual says it's okay. A lot of people say you can blow some valves or something like that. So, you know, I like to do it the safe way, but we ran into a problem that the bleeder nipples are completely rotted. They're not leaking. In that situation, until you got time to really address that, which I don't today, just kind of want to leave it alone. Yeah. So I took more fluid out of the master cylinder reservoir, and it's about half full. So what I'm going to do is, you've got two pistons. I put one of the old brake pads here as a surface, and I just don't want to start compressing these evenly. These should run relatively easy. Shouldn't give you much resistance. With these C-clamps, occasionally you got to reposition them. That's okay. Just make sure you do them both at the same time. And also check your reservoir. See how much is coming back up into it. We're still good. You don't want that reservoir to overflow to get messy. Alright, we're pretty much bottomed out. So that part is done. Now while you're doing that, especially when you take this back off, look at your pistons. Make sure that there's no fluid around them. If you're leaking brake fluid, then you're going to have to change those. Now you probably see some residue right here. That's that penetrating oil we squirted earlier. That's, you know, I did that. That's okay. So we got that compressed. Now let's get this rotor off. This rotor has a Torx bit, or a Torx screw in here that holds the rotor on. It is a T30. Take your hammer. If you don't have a hammer ratchet set, the proper thing, tap it in there real good. I'm actually amazed that there appears to be no rust on it Torx. But tap it in there and that'll kind of loosen it if there is. You may want penetrating oil, but let's see what we get. We get that wants to spin. Yes, kids, none of this right here is supposed to be on an impact. Don't try this at home. Now, if you don't have an impact wrench, there are other options for you. You could put a screwdriver in the vanes on that rotor and then use a breaker bar on the Torx screw and try to twist both at the same time. But the object there is going to be to stop that rotor from moving. Another option I've seen people do is to run a pry bar through a couple of the studs to use that as support. I caution you on doing that because if you botch up the threads on those studs, you're going to be in for a bad day. But the impact wrench, if you have the availability, is kind of the way to go in that situation. Now if this rotor won't quite nice, come off, whack it with a hammer. We don't want to hit between the studs. First, let's just try it. Nope, it's on there. Don't hit the studs. Alright, again, if you hit one of them studs, you screw up those threads, you've got a whole nother project for yourself, so don't hit the studs. Start tapping softly, see what you can get, and then increase power if you need to. But remember, the objective here is don't hit those studs. Also, as you can see as I'm doing here, turn the rotor, whack it a few times and turn that rotor around, and that way you're getting all the way around it. Only hit it from behind like this if you're sure that you're going to be changing that rotor anyway. You could actually damage the surface of the rotor by doing this, so I know I'm changing this rotor, so no big deal. Also be ready for it if it does pop off, because again, you don't want the rotor to fall on those threads of those studs and cause a bigger problem. Penetrating oil can be your friend here. Alright, there's a lot of rust around this edge and the mating surfaces here, so we're going to take our little brush and some brake clean. We're going to clean this up. It's a new rotor. Those others are rusted pretty bad, so I'm not even going to bother with trying to turn them. You could try that. There's an option to go to your local auto parts store if they turn rotors. You can have them do that. What they do is they shave off the surface. The problem with that is it makes the rotor thinner. Less metal for the heat to dissipate in it. So I'm just putting on new ones, especially considering how deep that rust was. So here's this. they come with a coating of cosmoline or some other type of rust inhibitor on them. And, well, this isn't got a lot. So what we're going to do is take our brake clean. Wash this down real good. That was on there. I'm not worried about the center part because it's not going to contact the pads. We don't want to forget to do the back. All right, let's put on the rotor. Before we put the rotor on, let's address the problem. We had a lot of rust right here. So if we take a little bit of our brake lube, and by the way, this brake lube is a synthetic and it's not petroleum based. So make sure you're using non-petroleum based brake lube. Make sure it's also made for high temperatures. What we'll do is just kind of get it started like that. I'm just going to take my thumb or my fingers and smear it all over the face of this. Alright, you just want a thin coat on this mating face and around here. This is a mating face too. Get a thin coat on there. You don't want it too thick because you don't want to create a gap between the mating surfaces. I mean, when you get down to it, the microscopic amounts, yes, it creates a gap. But you don't want it so much that it actually makes a difference in wheel alignment or anything like that. Alright, we have a new rotor. I want to make sure at least one of them screw holes is going to line up when we put this on. Also forgot to mention, I put on fresh gloves. Put on fresh gloves because you just had grease on them. You don't want to get grease on that surface you just cleaned. Now, take a couple of your lug nuts. You're just going to put these on by hand. They don't need to be tight, just snug. That's going to hold that rotor in place while you do the rest of your work. Alright, for this little guy here that goes in there, I just want to get the very tip of him with a little bit of grease on it. That'll prevent the chance that it's going to rust up inside there. I'll tell you a little secret. Some people don't reinstall these. But it was there, so I'm going to reinstall it. In the service manual, there is no torque spec listed, so that ought to be good enough. Alright, for now, I cleaned this out the best I could. But let's move on to the fun stuff. Now, me being a police officer, the Chevrolet does have the Tahoe and I guess the Silverado as a police package, so these were available. I had to do it. There's one with a groove cut. There's one that's flat. And the flat one will go on the inside. You'll have one that has the wear indicator on this end. And with this one, the wear indicator's on this end. That's what it looks like there. This one, this one. You want to arrange these so that the wear indicator is on the back side, or the leading edge, I guess you could say. The back side, when the truck's going forward, and the wheel's going this way, you want it to come to this first and then exit over here, if that makes sense. All right. Remember, this is on the back, so this one would actually be for the passenger side. we're working on the driver's side. With the outside pads, there appears to be no difference at all. They're basically the same pad. So you can put them at either end. Now I've cleaned this up the best I can. I'm not happy with it, but it is what it is. Comes with new hardware and instructions. Gives you a little information on how they go. It doesn't seem to matter front or back, they're all the same. Now, in an attempt to prevent what was happening, here we come with our brake grease again. Or brake lube. This technically, I guess, isn't grease. We'll put a little there, a little there. Let's take our thumb and smear it on real good. I just want a thin layer of this. It's the same deal as the wheels, or the hubs rather, that I don't want to put so much on that I'm creating a difference in the gap, or at least a significant. It'll be a micro difference, but not anything that's going to matter. So make sure we smooth that down real good. And we're also getting close to where the pads are, and we don't want a big glob of it to where it's going to end up on the pads, because that can be problematic. Now we can attach our hardware. It's kind of self-explanatory how it fits. Here I come with my grease again. Very thin layer. Very thin. I just saw where this bracket wasn't lined up very well. So I need to fix it. There we go. I thought that one seemed a little hard going on. There's a ridge back there it has to line up. So make sure you get that lined up good. This is the side that goes toward the inside of the truck. This is the inside. This is the driver's side. The wheel will be coming this way. So this right here is the correct pad. Here is the wear indicator. So these should, now before I get ahead of myself, just a little dab of grease there on these ends. This is a contact point. Dab on there. You can leave it a little bit heavy, but again, don't let it get crazy. You don't want it to end up on the friction surface. Just like that. Take that, knock that off there. All right. Want these to go in. And just like that, whoops, slid back out. But what I'm testing for is to make sure they slide freely. You don't want them binding up just like the ones that just came out of it. There is, if it does, then check your hardware. Make sure there's not too much rust buildup. Maybe you didn't get it all off. We'll do the same thing here. This one's the outboard pad. What we have is the hardware is not seated all the way. I want that to seat in there. There we go. We can finally start putting this thing back together. I ended up having to rework those a little bit, but they're nice and smooth now. And I put a new boot there. Now, those are actually pressed in. our bolts with a little bit of Loctite here ready to go. Get these started by hand. Be careful not to cross thread this stuff. Now I've got this turned all the way down. I'm not going to run the torque spec with this. This is just to snug them up, basically. We'll fight that old, the old Loctite that was on there. That was good enough. Caliper out of the way here. Alright. There, it's snugged. Alright, 129 foot-pounds. Not 128. Not 130. What I'm doing here is, this is the old guide pin, the good one. I'm just taking some brake clean and getting all the old grease off of it. Now the way this works, you got the pin and the bolt, right like this, all right? This screws into this, across the mounting bracket, and it pinches against that. This ride's free. A little bit on there. Take, put your grease on there. Just dab a little on. Just want a thin layer. You want grease. You want this nice and slick. You don't want globs of it in there. It's actually going to create a problem. Nice and slick. There we go. Slide him. You see a little air like that? Try and burp that out of there. There you go. Make sure that moves freely. That's how we want it. It wasn't doing that earlier. You had to chisel it out of there. Here's our brand new guide pin. Replaced the other one, it was crappy. Again, we're going to just smear that on there. Plenty, but a thin layer. We don't want it to actually create a problem. Slide him in there. Get him seated good. Should move freely. There we go. Now that I know this one can move freely, I'm actually going to pull him back out. He goes on top of the caliper. So I'll run the bolt through the top, what'll be the top. And screw that on. Now in the course of doing that, I got the pin dirty. Just clean it off. Make sure there's no rust stuff on it. I'm going to come right back and re-grease it. If you make a mistake, go ahead and correct it. Once you get that pin on there, onto the caliper, finger tight, go ahead and slide it into the caliper mounting bracket there at the top. And then once you've got it mounted on there, you can use your wrenches to tighten that thing up to the proper torque specification. See the service manual to find out what that specification is. There we are. Now, to prepare, before you put that caliper down, here comes some more grease. We'll put a little bit on the piston surface. You're going to put it on what I think they call this the ears. You know what, I'm going to be pretty generous on this tape. There was a lot of rust. Doesn't hurt, especially on this outside one. Put a smear of it down in front of that. Ain't gonna hurt nothing. All right, ease this down. And if you're lucky, you have to kind of wiggle it around a little bit and see what we're hitting on. There's what we want. We want it to slide right on top, just like that. Now we take our remaining bolt, put it in a slide pin. May not be lined up good. There we go. Now we're in. We're going to get this in here, and again, 74 foot-pounds. Got a little bite, a little bit. All right, we got her. For the most part, this side's done. You got to put the wheel back on, of course, and then before you take off, when you get this thing done, you want to pump your brakes before you go anywhere, because you just pushed all the pistons back. Needs to come in some, but that's it. You just got to do the other side now. Remember that you took some of that brake fluid out of there, so you're going to need to check the level and top off to make sure it's right at or just a hair below the max mark or whatever the marking is for your vehicle. All right, so there you go. After you've done both sides, and again, make sure that you top off the brake fluid, but when you're putting brake fluid in, you don't fill it to the top of the container. There's a maximum mark on there. You don't want to fill it any higher than that. Now, after you've topped off your brake fluid, both sides are done, you've put the wheels back on, and you've torqued the lug nuts down to their proper specification. If there's no more important of a time to do it, it is right now when you've just done a brake job and you've just put new rotors on. Because if you have an uneven torque on those lug nuts, or if they're torqued too tight or even torqued too loose, then you can cause that rotor to have a flex in it, and it's a brand new rotor, and it's going to get its first exposure to heat and everything. It's going to be setting itself, and if you put a warp in there, then you're going to have a pulsating brake pedal, and you're going to end up having to get new rotors or have those rotors turn. Now, before you move the vehicle, I've already said it once in the video, but before you move that vehicle, push the brake pedal, make sure you have a firm brake pedal. You just compress those pistons back, there's a distance between those pads and the rotor. Under normal circumstances, those pads are just touching the rotor or just slightly away from it. But right now there's a big gap there, and if you just go take it off and haven't set those, if you haven't pushed the brake pedal yet and you go to take off, then you're going to probably find yourself without brakes for the first few pumps, and that could of course result in an accident. Now, the next thing you're going to want to do is do a little test on your work. Don't take off down the interstate at 70 miles an hour not having pushed that brake pedal yet. Now, when you do first go to take off, what you want to do is you want to accelerate just to about 5 miles an hour and then stop. Make sure those brakes are going to work. And also make sure that you know where your parking brake or emergency brake is in case you need to employ that. As a last ditch effort, you could always throw it in park, or if you've got a manual transmission, If you're in first gear, shut off the ignition, and hopefully that'll bring it to a stop. If you're on level ground, which you should be when you're testing brakes, if you don't know if they're going to work for sure, don't start by going downhill. But be on level ground and either throwing it in park, which could cause some damage, but if it's better than an accident, then it's a lesser of evils issue there. That's if your parking brake fails. Go for the parking brake first. But on a manual transmission, you can also just turn the ignition off and it'll come to a slow stop as the engine does the braking for you. After you do a couple of 5 mile per hour tests, take it up to about 10 miles an hour, and again, test the brakes, just make sure they're going to work for you. I'd want to say you're done, but you're not. Or you may not be, how about that? Your brake hardware should have came with some instructions, and you need to review those. And there's a procedure you're going to need to do, be either called breaking in the brakes, brake burnishing, or brake bedding. And there may be some more names for it out there, but it's going to involve you making a series of accelerations and then slowing down, not necessarily stops, but accelerate and then slow down, accelerate and slow down, and you're going to do that in a certain pattern, be from a certain speed to a certain speed, a certain amount of times, and there may be a series of those that you have to do. And what that's going to do is it's going to break in those brake pads and basically get them married up to the rotors, so that you'll get a lot better braking performance, especially right out of the gate. Additionally, don't expect full braking performance out of your brakes till about 300 to 500 miles. I'm going to do another video at some point to kind of elaborate some more on the brake burnishing process. There are some brake pads where the manufacturers don't recommend it, so if your brake pads didn't come with a little slip or something that gives you the break-in procedure, then get on the internet, because I think most people agree that there needs to be some type of process done to get those pads broke in. And because you're going to be transferring some material from the pad to the rotor when you do this, and it's something that needs to be done. So if there's not a slip that tells you, check the manufacturer's website to see if there's any recommendations on that site. You'll have to do a little hunting. But these pads in particular, they didn't come with that paper. And I got to searching and I found on the manufacturer's website where they had a bulletin come out where they actually now recommend. It wasn't included with the brake pads, but you found where the company had found it's better to do it, and they put in a recommendation, which I went out and did. But again, there are some brake pads that they recommend not doing any type of braking procedure, and that's okay. I'm going to do a separate video talking about brake burnishing, because it's something that it's actually probably worthy of its own video, just a discussion, just a little information about what it is and why you should do it and that kind of thing, and maybe times that you shouldn't do it. When that video comes out, I'll come back and put a link in the description so you can check out that video too. Once you got your fluid topped off, you check that brake pedal, you've done some test stops, and then you went and do your brake burnishing if it is necessary, then we can say mission accomplished. But I do want to discuss just a few more considerations I want you to think about if you're going to do your own brake job. First and foremost, if you're going to do your own brake job, you need one of these. You need a service manual. Again, link in the description. Get you a service manual and read the chapter on the brakes. One thing about doing a brake job is everything, it seems like it's pretty uniform. It seems like once you've done a few that you ought to be able to do any. And actually, that's not the truth. A lot of vehicle manufacturers, they've done a lot of different things, a little bit different stuff. And as you saw in this video, I was expecting that the brake pads were going to lift up with the caliper. I didn't have them. So the compressing of the pistons before you raise the caliper wasn't exactly necessary. It did help break loose where the brake pads were froze up by rust into the caliper. It helped break that loose, but the actual reason for doing that wasn't necessary for this truck. And confession time, I didn't look in here, I just got started. But the bigger, more important thing is, and I did look it up in here, was to know whether there's a proportioning valve or a pressure differential switch that you're going to have to be concerned with. There wasn't with this one. If you're going to do any brake bleeding, and I just read the section on bleeding in here, if you're going to do any brake bleeding, there's always a risk, if there is one of these pressure differential switches, that you could set that thing off and you end up with a big red light on your dashboard, but that's not the worst of it. Some of those pressure differential switches, they will cut off the brake flow to the side that they think is leaking, which essentially you do have a leak when you're bleeding the brakes. You've opened up the system and pushed that fluid out and there's no pressure. So it thinks that there's a leak. So it shuts off accessibility to that and closes that off so that you don't lose more fluid. Some of those little valves, when that happens, when that switch gets set, they are a pain to try to reset because they're not actually designed to be reset. And sometimes you just have to replace it. So if you're going to be doing a brake bleed, make sure you've checked out your service manual. If you have one of those, get the right tools, the right adapters, the right clips. Some of them have clips that you clip onto. You hold a little valve down and put a clip on it to keep it from closing back up. That way you can do the service you need to do. But if you're not aware of that part and you start doing a brake bleed and trip that little valve, you're in for a bad day. You don't have to worry about this one. If you're doing a 78 Buick, that's something to be concerned with. Both are by General Motors, two very different systems, mainly because two very different eras. And you'll see those proportioning valves I'm talking about that have the pressure differential switch in them. You'll see those more in older vehicles that don't have ABS. But there still can be variations of that found in some of these newer vehicles. All right, so the last thing I'm going to mention is the future plans, because we know we have a problem with this vehicle. It's a common problem that a lot of vehicles experience if you live in an area where there's a lot of salt on the road. And that is, now we know that this particular setup is prone to getting rust in and locking up those brake pads. So what I'm going to do is, after winter's over, probably around April or May, once winter's over and a few good rains have come by, and there's really no more salt out there on the road for the truck to pick up, I want to come back and just kind of do a service on those brakes. I want to see what kind of condition they're in and just go ahead and put some fresh grease in there, or lube, because we don't want to use actual petroleum-based grease, but we want to put in the brake lube in there. Just put some fresh stuff. Check out the caliper pin boots. Put fresh lube on those caliper pins, and especially a caliper mounted bracket. We want to come back, check out the hardware, make sure it's not seizing up, make sure it's not getting a pinch on it, and just make sure everything's moving free. Just go ahead and clean it up and put some fresh lube on there. And I think if we do that after winter, then we should be able to make it all the way up till next winter and through the end of it, and then come back the following spring and do the same thing. And I think if we do that once a year, which doesn't want to take much time out of my day, but it's going to help us get the full life of those pads. So it's something I'm going to look at and I'm going to do, and there'll be a video on that, and once that video's out, again, link in the description down below. All right, so that's it. First of all, if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, please do so. Click like on this video. You can also connect with me socially now on Facebook. Link in the description to my Facebook page. So check that stuff out, and thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.